Hello, this is an assessment for restoration of a Bechstein grand piano Model A, 180 centimetres long, made in about 1908. Now, looking at the casework on the piano, the veneer is generally in good condition. It's rosewood, as most Bechstein Model A's would be rosewood of this period. And if we look round, we can see that it's pretty evenly faded as well. And it's very faded, though. If you look at the top here of the top of the rim here, you can see a very different colour from the side. So that is very clearly faded, and generally faded exactly the same colour all over. So there's no variation in fading. Very often when there's a light source, you find that one side is a lot more faded than the other. But this piano is pretty much the same. And even the top lid, as we've said before, when you pull the lid up here, you can see a hugely different colour there where it's been kept back. That will be very dark. But this is faded evenly again. So obviously you could leave it like that and just try to improve it. But this is a candidate for repolishing because they do look very spectacular when they're refinished, and it's such a wonderful piano that it's worth doing. The serial number on Bechstein Grand should be on the frame here, but it's very often either not put back on when it's restored, or you can hardly read it, and you can just about see maybe a number or two there. But there's a number underneath the piano that we can use to date the piano to. So on the cross member underneath the piano here, you can see 30046, and we have a list of those and how they correlate to the proper serial number. But so often we get emails coming in thinking that that is the date of the piano, and in fact it isn't correct. It's around about 2.4 times more to get the real serial number, but it's not quite as accurate as that. If you have got that number on your Bechstein Grand and you want us to try and identify the age of it, please let us know. And there's the Harrods label inside the piano. Now, we do have a list of Harrods numbers, and that suggests that it was sold by them in about 1932. How much restoration they did, I really can't tell. They probably repolished the piano, certainly, and they would have done some regulation and so on. But they sold lots of pianos that weren't new in those days. Oddly enough, this cork was sellotaped to the piano. No idea why. The keys are ivory keys, a little bit dirty as you can see, but 85 note. Model A grand piano of this age is 85 keys, so that's important to know. If you're practicing, then 85 keys, as we've said before, is sufficient for you to get through all your exams. And there's Bechstein logo, and you can see, I always look behind the keys to see if there's any moth, and in fact you can't really see the felt very much there because you can usually see if it's being chewed, but there's no moth in the action or in the piano as far as we can see. Sorry, I meant moth damage from the larvae that eat the felt, and you can see if this has got little white flecks in it and sometimes holes as well, then there's clearly moth damage. I'm mentioning this because it's so common, but actually this piano has a clean bill of health as I can see, with no moth damage at all, so that's good news. But it does have an issue, and if we look at the frame, these are normal Model A frame cracks. If you can show you those ones, if you look on, you just put into a Google search Bechstein Model A frame crack, and you're going to see these so commonly, perhaps 1 in 4 at least, I would say, maybe more. If you're a tuner, you might like to comment. There's 2 frame cracks on the two main members there, and if we look here, there's another frame crack. Now that is much more unusual to see a Bechstein cracked at that point. Very unusual. In fact, I don't think I've seen that before. If you've seen that, please do comment. Recently I've seen a crack right at the far end there, which is again extremely unusual. But if you're going to buy Bechstein, you probably won't have any problem with, well, obviously you need to get it double checked out if you're worried about it, but normally we don't have any problems with cracks in Bechstein. And if these are there, you can still tune the piano with those, no problem at all. If it's restrung, then we would automatically stitch weld, which is commonly done and extremely commonly done, and it always works well. So this is the one that I'm worried about, and the client is probably worried about it too. Now, tuner's written on the keys here, do not raise pitch, no doubt because he was worried about the cracks. The pitch is very much below concert pitch. I think it's about 10 beats below. We'll have a look at the assessment sheet in a minute. Well, to repair that, and I do think it's a good idea to repair, then you would need to dismantle the whole piano and you'll have to, obviously, that means you can clean the soundboard at the same time. If there's any cracks in the soundboard, they can be repaired. I can't see any at the moment, but when it's taken to bits, sometimes one or two do appear, and then you need to shim them. Well, that's more cosmetic than anything, but it's always done when we restring the piano. So dismantling completely, that means taking all the tuning pins out, all the strings off, the frame out, and then weld the frame, or stitch-weld the frame, and then we can refinish the frame, refinish the soundboard. So obviously that's a lot of work, but it's worth doing on a Model A Bechstein. I think they're beautiful tone, and really, I've always had, as I mentioned before, an old German or sometimes old English piano in my house instead of a modern piano. I really prefer the tone of them. As piano tuners, I think you might agree with me, and hopefully do, that the tone of the older pianos is far more interesting for if you're a tuner. And certainly the question is getting the touch to match it. Obviously, you can see here, I'm just focusing in on this because that is an interesting repair, and we've mentioned this before. Someone's put two strings onto the same pin. Well, normally it goes round, as you can see, and back up. So you don't need to replace the string if it's broken at the pin. They normally break at the pin. So they normally break here because when they're pulled up, and by the way, if we do pitch raise, we lubricate here, take down and up, and rarely break a string then. Extremely rarely. It does happen sometimes, but if you break a string, it breaks here normally because of the difference in tension when you pull it up without taking it down and back up again. It may happen anyway, but that's where they tend to break. Even if they're rusty, they'll break there 9 times out of 10, perhaps 19 out of 20 times, maybe even more than that. So you can then wind it down on the pin here, wind it down on one pin, and then take it up on the other pin, and then you don't need to replace the string, which is much better because the old string will match, and the new string obviously has got to stretch. And you can see one of those two is newer than the other. It's not that new, but it's newer than the other. And there's another replacement I saw as well further down. Now, the piano is extremely flat. That A should be 440, and it's about 427, I think. And you can hear generally extremely out of tune. I would suggest it hasn't been tuned for a very long time because the tuning pins are reasonably tight, in which case if it's tuned sort of relatively regularly, it will be much more in tune with that. But it's very out of tune, as you can hear. The 3 unisons on the strings are out with each other. The general underlying tone is all there. It's good tone underneath, typical Bechstein Model A. And if that's restrung, those strings will certainly sound a lot better as well. They're a bit tubby. You could clean them, you could turn them and clean them, but really I think this is a candidate for full restoration. We're looking at the bass section, no sign of moth in the felt here again. A little bit of mildew, and that shows that it's probably been in a damp place for a while, and there's other evidence of that as well. Now, the tuning pins are generally quite tight. The whole piano, quite tight tuning pins, but you can see my lever's a bit loose here, and this is a standard medium style lever. So that tells me that the pins are almost definitely original. Strings are original. So if it is obviously restrung, then we're going to put larger tuning pins in, or replace the rest plank. If it's being fully restored, then replacing the rest plank's a very good idea, because it's like a new piano with a new rest plank in, and then really will outlast, well, I think outlast actually a modern piano because they're so well made. So let's have a look at the action now. So called a Schwander action is, which a lot of Bechsteins have, and it's as good as a modern piano, if not better made actually, and really enjoy working on these pianos because they're so well manufactured that the hammers are tight, so these hinges are tight here, and that affects the touch. The keys also need lubricating, as we've said before, and the rollers has got worn. So the hammers, if you look at the hammer wear, you can see there's quite a lot of hammer wear. So at some stage it's been used a lot, and the hammers are worn. Now they either need refacing and then voicing, or you could replace them. We would like to replace hammer shanks and rollers and do the whole lot so that these hinges are going to be identically good. Either Wren or Arbel parts is the parts that we use, and I think most people in the trade use. So that's quite a common job that we're doing. The springs, just testing the spring by pushing down my finger on the key and then lifting a little bit, and it's going up. So the springs are reasonable, but there's generally need of regulation. So you could just regulate the piano, reface the hammers. But if we're going to do a full restoration on the inside, that's the acoustic side, then doing the action side is definitely a sensible thing to do. So that's a Bechstein Model A made in about 1908, and the main issue here is the cracked frame, but the piano generally needs full restoration, I would suggest, and certainly would benefit from acoustic and mechanical restoration and repolishing. So if that's a possibility, then we'd love to do that, because it'll turn out an extremely fine piano. And the key weighting is something we didn't mention before, but at the moment it's very heavy. So that's 65 on that bottom C there, 63, generally over 60, and it should be here 50, as we said before, roughly 50, and then tapering off to about 48 here, and it's 62. So definitely needs full restoration, I would suggest. So that's an assessment of a Bechstein Model A grand piano, 180 centimeters long, made in about 1908. And we've restored several of these, and they do restore extremely well. This has unusually a crack on the frame where they don't normally occur, but the cracks that are next to the tuning pins are very, very common on Model A Bechsteins, and you don't have to worry too much about them. When you restring them, then we would always stitch weld the crack, and that's commonly done in the trade. But as you can hear, it's extremely out of tune at the moment, but still you can hear the underlying tone, which I'm trying to listen to. Sorry, it doesn't sound very pleasant because of the tuning. But fine piano, and certainly well worth full restoration. Thank you very much for listening.